Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to this session. I am very, very honored to be able to host a session with such fantastic people who are doing just amazing work on the ground to show how agriculture and actually business can be done differently. So we have, there we go, we have 3 experts with us today who I'm very excited to introduce, and I will let them introduce themselves. And I'd like to explain a little bit about how I came to be moderating the session and what we are doing at Footprints. So Footprints has a goal to live in an inclusive, regenerative world. And the way that we are approaching that is through businesses and supporting businesses who are creating fantastic change in the world. And so I'm happy to present the organizations we have today. There are 2 main things we do. So one, in Ghana, we run a program for businesses to help them improve their social and environmental performance. And these businesses are predominantly in the food and waste sectors. And then as part of that, we're very passionate about learning from what already exists and from championing the incredible actions that are already happening. So we've been doing research into existing business models from across the continent that are adopting circular economy practices. And we have a case study database now of 500 cases. So there are 3 main objectives of the circular economy work we're doing. So one is to build knowledge about what's already happening. As I mentioned, we've got a database of 500 cases. We've got a map that's geolocated on our website that you can access. We have a collection on the Circular Economy's Knowledge Hub, and we also have a website called stories.footprintsafrica.co, which show these incredible examples. And we really want to amplify the work that they are doing and show what's already happening on the African continent, because there's a lot we can learn from Africa. It's not necessarily what we can teach Africa. And I think there's a lot of humility required in that regard. The second aspect of our work is to start to measure what that looks like. So we've seen a lot of circular washing and greenwashing in businesses, and we want to show there's actually a spectrum in terms of the level of circularity and also then evidence that impact. And so we're starting a piece of work on metrics to support businesses to be able to articulate the change that they're creating with these new business models. And then the third piece of our work is supporting those business models, and we can talk a bit more about that later. So we recently produced, as part of our first piece on knowledge, a report which you'll find on our website on regenerative agriculture. And we have 3 representatives of organizations that we profiled in this report with us today, who I'm very excited to introduce you to now. So without further ado, please, Kofi, tell us about ecoforests. Great, thank you, Joanna. Yeah, real honor also to be speaking today as a child of both continents, of Europe and Africa. And so in 2015, we started ecoforests. And so, we're an agroforestry company, and we help farmers to increase their income and biodiversity by offering sort of training on good best agricultural practices and encouraging farmers to farm with trees where necessary. We also assist farmers to market with their cash crops such as maize, and we've done extensive work also in the cassava value chain. At the moment, we're currently going through a carbon credit certification process to help farmers, to create a bigger incentive for farmers to, adopt regenerative agricultural practices, because at the moment, it's cheaper to destroy the environment than to adopt best agricultural practices. So it's farmers in a really difficult position. We're focused on job creation and the economics of biodiversity. And our sister company, Oko Energy, is looking at creating energy from agricultural residues, such as shea. And then with the byproduct being biochar, which we can put back into the ground. And if you don't know about biochar, research is one of our best solutions to draw carbon from the atmosphere, a nature-based solution. Thank you. Fabulous. Thanks, Kofi. There you go. First action item for everyone, research biochar. Chris, please tell us more about Warc.
Great. Thank you, Joanna, and Kofi, thanks for that introduction as well. Actually, one of the things that you touched on just then about, it being cheaper to destroy the environment than to look after it actually echoes exactly the reason why I chose to put these next three pictures as kind of the background to what I wanted to talk about on what we are doing, you know. So Joanna, you can flick through these three quite quickly, but basically subsistence farming leads to jeopardizing our fragile ecosystems, and therefore Warc as an organization begins to exist, right? So we are a social enterprise with operations in Ghana and Sierra Leone. We've been in Sierra Leone since 2011. And then expanded across to Ghana in 2018. So our mission is to get subsistence farmers in Africa out of poverty, and we have a vision that, you know, Africa one day will feed the world within our lifetimes. So, you know, the key things that we try to support here is that for farmers to move beyond subsistence, which then allows them to think about sinking the carbon in the soils. So this is kind of the pathway that we're pushing and following through there. So to achieve this, we engage in three key business areas, a production business, service business, and then market linkages. So on the production side, we have a training farm in the center of Ghana and in the south of Sierra Leone. And this is a place where we develop and test new regenerative agricultural innovations and methodologies that can then be transferred across to the fields of the smallholder farmers. Secondly, and what is the real core of our business is this provision of services to smallholder farmers in the form of a bundled regenerative agricultural inputs as a service to these farmers. So that includes all the inputs to production, mechanization, and training. And then finally, we have a market linkages element to our business, which helps those same farmers that have now farmed under regenerative agricultural approach and who can now benefit, or will soon, as they grow, benefit from the increased productivity to actually market and monetize those same gains. So we do this with our own farmers and also offer services to other farmers that do not yet exist within our network in order to catalyze change and focus on the import substitution of staple grains to catalyze further industries in the countries such as rice in Sierra Leone and also maize and soybeans in Ghana, with a view to looking at poultry production.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris. Peter, I'm going to hand over to you to share more about the work of reNature.
So thank you, and for the introduction from my two colleagues. I am Peter. I work for reNature. reNature is an NGO based in Netherlands, but works with the local partners in Kenya. So the specific business plan that I would want to present is based in Kenya, that is in Laikipia County. And the problem that we are solving is the question of land degradation, mainly manifested through soil erosion, which is having great impact in terms of biodiversity and also increased human-wildlife conflict. Our development intervention is through a local partner, that is the Laikipia Permaculture Center Trust. And here we emphasize on regenerative agroforestry because of its multiple benefits in terms of biodiversity, in terms of enriching soils, but most importantly, in terms of increasing the incomes at the community level. And we do this through a model school where we are able to provide farmers with a platform to learn or to get knowledge and capacities in terms of adopting regenerative agroforestry for purposes of landscape restoration. And we support farmers by providing assorted agroforestry seedlings. We provide a lot of trainings so that they can mitigate against climate change, but also provide marketing opportunities and linkages. Our main objective is for this project is to catalyze growing of more tree seedlings. That is so that we are able to solve the land degradation question, but also very importantly is to look at the farmers' income, how we can increase the income that farmers get. Because with land degradation, there are more people who are sliding into abject poverty, and that is a major concern because then they only turn to the natural resource for their livelihood. And then to look for ethical businesses. We want people who can do business that is ethical, they can track and trace where they are getting the products. And we have several businesses that we are promoting. And the first one is, our approach is to support processing facilities. That is, we are building factories, we are building facilities for value addition, but we're also linking farmers to the businesses. And our products include aloe secundiflora. Aloe secundiflora is an indigenous aloe that grows in dry areas like Laikipia. And there we are using fresh leaves, which are very nice for cosmetic products. And also we are making aloe flower tea. And then we have another agroforestry seedling that is Moringa oleifera, where the leaves and seeds have a lot of uses, both health and also cosmetics. And then we're also looking at honey processing. And recently we have gotten into carbon credit. Our market for these products include Lush. Lush is a British-based company that is has been taking fresh aloe from Laikipia. We're also in talks with Mas Newen, again a company based in Chile, and the interest is on Moringa, especially the seeds and the leaves. And then the Rabobank is assisting us in terms of carbon credit. So basically, that is our model. We should discuss more later. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Peter. One of the things that makes my skin tingle actually about all of your businesses is how you are operating with your communities, and you're creating value at multiple levels. So it's regenerating soils, for example, it's rehabilitating water tables, it's supporting ecosystem services to take place, offering more stability to local communities. Everything that you said, you've always put the farmers at the center of what you're talking about. I'd love it if each of you could give examples of some of the non-monetary value that your business models are adding, and if there are any ways that you've been able to measure that. So let me start with you, Kofi.
Oh, great. Thanks, Joanna. You know, one of the main thing we're doing is strengthening communities and really helping them to leverage their collective power so that they can gain a better price for their produce and also inputs. You know, this in turn means that, you know, most children are in school and more people are able to afford, you know, basic healthcare. And then we measure this from our baseline studies. So it's really essential. You know, without understanding our baseline, we don't have anything to measure on. So that's how we measure our impact.
Amazing, thank you. Peter, please, I'd love to hear any examples from your part. You're muted, Peter. It wouldn't be a Zoom call if we didn't have to say that.
Yes, I'm saying I want to support what Kofi has said, but then look at something else that we are getting, and that is the question of food security, because we are working in an area that is arid and semi-arid. The question of food availability and nutrition security is quite rampant, and here we solve that by promoting food forestry concepts so that we can ensure that farmers have variety of crops, variety of food at different times. And this is also a model that is enabling us to use or to mimic a natural forest system where different layers of different trees have a very complex interactions in terms of nitrogen fixation, in terms of shades and all that. But most importantly is also the question of pest management, because the variety then enables us to avoid what we call a peak in terms of pests, because different pests have different plants that they prefer, and because they grow at different times, then we're able to achieve a benefit. So for us, food and nutrition security is one of the benefits that we are accruing, and we're able to measure because we do monitoring on quarterly basis, so we are able to see what is available, what the farmers are getting, and we are able to measure our progress. Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, one of the things that Peter just mentioned regarding food security is a really interesting element here as well, because I think this is something that, you know, I'm quite passionate about, is that we have to think about regenerative agriculture in Africa at the same time as thinking, which, you know, seems to be a bit more of a longer term view on things, at the same time as which we also have to focus on immediate term food security needs, you know. So that's a nice way to frame a little bit what's going on and kind of the reality of implementing these programs. One of the things, so to go back to your question, Joanna, one of the things that I think that Warc has supported farmers in and rural communities in is actually the, how can I call it, but like the generation or the access to time again. Because through mechanization, as part of the solutions that we're providing within our services, what it does is it actually allows farmers to take back time that they would otherwise use toiling manually in the fields, right? So this element of time suddenly brings back the benefit of the ability to actually invest in other income generating activities, or to go and do the things in which me and you and everyone else, would be comfortable doing, like actually having kids that can go to school and attend school because they no longer have to work in the fields, and investing or working on other community projects that can increase as Kofi was saying, increase community livelihoods and benefits. So I think that's probably a key thing that I'd like to let people walk away with as a thought.
So powerful. I think the thing that Kofi said earlier, which is really heartbreaking, is that this point around it's cheaper for farmers, or it's cheaper for farmers to degrade soil. And when your margins are so slim, you have to go where the money is. It's not really a choice in reality. And with this point around the value that you are creating, I know that you are all, with your organizations, investing in creating that value. It actually sometimes can cost you more to create that extra value, whereas you don't necessarily always get profits or benefit from the additional value that you're creating in terms of all these aspects. So I'm curious, how can policymakers support the viability of your business models, which need to exist given all these, the clear contribution that you're making to economic resilience? So please, Chris, jump in.
I think there are three key areas if you try to break it down could. So number one would be to contextualize their efforts a little bit further. Right? So we think Sub-Saharan Africa, we think Pan-African, but actually there's a huge difference between operating in Sierra Leone versus there is in Ghana versus there is in Kenya versus there is in Mozambique. So when we have to work at a policy level that kind of goes Pan-African, it makes it quite difficult to develop solutions and actually implement them in place. Secondly, I think the policymakers should start looking at longer term, more patient support. So I use that. Our vision is that within our lifetime, Africa would feed the world. So, which then kind of shows that, trying to develop for 1, 2, 3 year programming and that level of support is incredibly difficult to see that the benefit come out of it. And then thirdly, I think it's to not get fixated on what I would call the minimal dollar or euro value of support per beneficiary, right? I know that that's incredibly important when it comes to thinking about public funding and whatnot, but actually, if we need to create sustainable change that eventually reduces the resilience, the reliance on this type of support, then we have to think transformational and we have to think catalytic, and actually both those things are extremely expensive. So,
yeah. Great. Sorry, go ahead.
It sounds like you're ready to jump in there.
Yeah, just want to echo what Chris was saying about more long-term thinking, because the EU, sort of European countries are doing a lot already. There's a lot of investments already, but however, a lot of those programs are short-term, around 2 or 3 years. But when we're talking about regenerating landscapes, we're talking sort of decades, right? So I think it's really essential to kind of restructure those programs, because we really it's like really essential. We must be shift our thinking to like more long term instead of years, to thinking in decades, so that we can so that Africa can feed the world within our lifetimes. Because at the moment we're not on track, but there's a lot of great opportunities to get on track. So we really need long term thinking.
Absolutely. How about you, Peter? What do you want to see from policymakers? And please make sure you're unmuted to answer.
Yes, I wanted to say a policy challenge that we've been having in our attempt to have ethical business. Kenya is again a signatory of Nagoya Protocol that provides for access to benefit sharing, and therefore part of our model is to ensure that the off-takers, or those people who are getting to business, most of them who are based in Europe, are compliant to tools or instruments of access and benefit sharing, including prior informed consent, mutually agreed terms. And our policy challenge is that at the moment in Kenya, I don't know what about other countries, is that there are different institutions involved in that. So sometimes it takes decades, it takes very long for you to get all those permits. And remember, this business, so the aspect of time sometimes denies the communities the benefit that they would have obtained from the genetic resource, or sometimes the delay, and therefore for us we are limited in terms of that. And that policy shift would be very important, having a one-stop shop where all the certification can be considered, and therefore save a lot of time and ensure that communities access the resources as and when they should. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I think we're, as ever with circular economy and regenerative practices, we just need more collaboration. So really asking for policymakers and institutions to collaborate. Linked to policy is the big question that everyone's always asking is around investment. And I think the point you're making about long-term is absolutely critical on this, because investment time horizons, as we know, are shorter as well. So I'm very curious, and maybe Chris, I'm going to come to you, and if anyone wants to jump in, we can also go for it. But current investment and funding, thinking about the instruments that currently are designed for a linear economy and for an agricultural system that doesn't serve African communities in the long term. So what do funders need to take into account? What are you looking for from funders when designing financial instruments to support business models like yours?
Sure. I think, this touches exactly onto what we were saying before, but I think the idea here would be that funders and funding instruments need to recognize the reality of agricultural change here in West Africa. Well, sorry, in Africa. And as we were saying, especially one that encourages sustainable and regenerative agricultural practices, exactly so that there's benefits for years to come. In this context, I think what we need is funders and these instruments to take bets on organizations like us, because we understand that it's a risky venture, and we understand that that this takes a lot of time. So actually what we need is truly patient capital that kind of goes beyond that 3 to 5 year time horizon, because the realization of the results and the benefits that come through this will take at least that long, if not longer. And the other element in here would be that we also have to understand that agricultural cash flows and the profiles that, and the way that the cash flow burn essentially happens is very different from what you described, from a linear economy type of investment, where we will continue to make a lot of investment that doesn't generate that level of return for the first few years of operations and the first few years of what we're designing. So elements such as being able to defer interest payments or capitalizing this towards the end of the repayment term and whatnot are things that are incredibly key to allow organizations like us to actually go out and take the risk on some of these innovations that we're trying to push forward with. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's so important as well to understand that sometimes there is an element of kind of experimentation that happens at the beginning as well, and if you're having to make returns immediately, it's just not possible. So that's a very powerful insight, and I think there's a lot of people talking about patient capital, and the word that you used there was truly patient capital, because genuine, to Kofi's point, we're not talking about years, we're talking about decades. So very powerful. One of the biggest criticisms I think we heard when we were doing our research into regenerative agriculture was that the current agricultural model that we have does not take into account the needs, and it doesn't take into account the existing wisdom that exists on the ground from those who are working on the land. And so I'd love to hear from all of you, what has the response been from the communities that you're working with, and also what have you learned from them? So please, Kofi, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we've run a number of agroforestry workshops with the community that we work in, and I'm always amazed by the inherent knowledge that the farmers have, in terms of about from medicinal trees to like the ecosystem services benefits that trees have, that trees provide. Farmers know all of this. It's like it's been handed down to them for generations. But like I mentioned earlier, it's just a lot easier and a lot cheaper to destroy the environment than to regenerate it. And I think it puts farmers in a very difficult position because many of them know what is needed, but they're unable to do that. So I think it's those are things I've learned from being on the ground, that farmers do know what is needed, but they're in a really difficult position.
Yeah, we've absolutely heard that echoed when we were doing this research. So it's a really important thing not to diminish that wisdom, which I think often is the case. Peter, you're ready. I can see you're ready to speak.
Yeah, because I want to build on what Kofi has said in terms of the indigenous knowledge held by our communities. And when we have workshops, when we have conferences, we always realize how rich the information they have in terms of what trees to protect, and in even some religious reasons, so that there are some trees in Africa, in Kenya, you can never touch because they are considered sacred. And in that way, we are able to have a lot of conservation effort. But just like what Kofi has said, regardless of that information, the pressure in terms of getting income and other economic issues sometimes push farmers to go into the route of land degradation. But there's a lot of information that is held by the communities. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I guess both Kofi and Peter mentioned just exactly how important it is that we listen to farmers and the local knowledge. And I would say, just to add on to it, is that the key thing that we've experienced year on year as we've gone out to try to deliver and implement the programming or the innovations that we believe are necessary is that until you gain the farmer's trust, you will achieve nothing, right? And I think that's the learning that we take, and I can see Kofi smiling to that as well. So, that's the learning that we take at heart, because you can go in with the best laid plans and ideas that you can bring and think about from all over the world because you've experienced it anywhere else. But if you don't build that trust with the farmer, then all of your plans don't mean anything, right? So it's a very fine balance in our opinion to, one, push your agenda and to encourage the things that we see is what's necessary, but at the same time to also accept and understand those constraints, just like Kofi and Peter were saying, that farmers have to operate under, so that they believe in what you're doing and they can actually associate that your solution is a possibility for them. And I think that's a real key piece of learning that we take from being with farmers day in and day out.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because oftentimes farmers are taking the most risk. And so asking them to experiment and try new things is a big ask because their whole livelihoods are at stake. And oftentimes, if it goes wrong, they're not going to get compensated. If they don't deliver their crops, there's nothing for people to buy. And so I think that point around the kind of earning the trust of them is so powerful because I think it's been so often abused. And the reason why we love the three organizations that you're working with is because of the role that you play with your communities. Which is, it's wonderful to see that they are part of designing your business model, which is unique. So we are at the EU Africa Business Forum. And so the question that I would love to ask is, what role should Europe play? And also, what role should Europe not play in African agriculture? So I would love all of you to share your thoughts on that, and then we'll come to a close afterwards. So please, Peter, what role would you like to see Europe play, and what role should they not play?
Yeah, one of the issues or roles I would want to see Europe play more is in terms of building capacities of local organizations or local institutions that are mandated with specific laws, especially going back to the question of ethical business. So we want to comply with ABS, but there are some institutions that are not very keen in terms of what they are supposed to do. So that lack of adequate capacity therefore limits their ability to provide the necessary support, and in some cases a collapse of the business. So for me, I would want to see Europe coming stronger and building those capacities so that then we can have ethical business that can be beneficial and that can promote sustainable development. Thank you.
And Peter, is there anything you'd like them not to do?
At the moment, no.
Okay, there we go. Free reign. Kofi, agree, disagree?
Just to add on to what Peter was saying, I think as also being as I said, a child of Europe and Africa, I think there's a unique role that EU citizens and especially African diaspora residents and also citizens of the EU can play. And I'd love it if we can look at sort of like tax incentives for people to invest in regenerative agriculture, the same way there is when you donate to a charity. But I specifically want to look at regenerative agriculture as a business, not as a charity. So I'd like to see some redefining of some financial instruments. Also, I think carbon credits offer a great opportunity. It's not the main solution, but it's an important pillar that's emerging. So and the barrier to entry to become certified is huge for a lot of businesses. So what ways I'd love for Europe to look at ways to de-risk that, so that maybe once you get certified, that we know that, say, the EU will buy a certain percentage of carbon credits, at a fixed price, because that would really help to boost investor confidence, knowing that there would be a return once we're certified. And I know that Rabobank and Plan Viva are looking into that, and also the partners I'm working with, Carbon Better, are also looking into that. But I'd love to see much more sort of like higher level institutional support for such programs.
Thanks. And you very cleverly wove in the question I previously neglected to ask you. So well done for adding your answer to that one at the same time. Thank you, Kofi. And Chris?
Great. I think both Peter and Kofi obviously went into quite a bit of detail into what Europe should and should not do. I think for my approach, it would be building on to both of those things, and which was kind of that attitude of play a supportive role rather and don't play a dictative role in the support that Europe can provide African nations and businesses like us that are based here in Africa. And by that what I mean is this is the first time, as far as I know, the first time in the world in which we have to do both agricultural development for the purposes of human development and achieve regenerative agricultural outcomes at the same time. So this is actually new to everyone. It's not just new to Africa. And because of that flavor of it being new to everyone, we've got to understand, of course, the experience and the knowledge and the resources that we can bring from Europe, but at the same time have value of the people and the organizations that are on the ground here, and to do exactly what Peter was saying, and to provide a very supportive and capacity building style of support, so that this only has to happen once. And then once we get it right here, we can continue here in Africa to do it again and again and again by ourselves, and hopefully even kind of export that knowledge back, because that's when it's going to happen in the rest of the world, all right? So I think that would be my message in terms of what Europe should and shouldn't do.
Yeah, and it's as a European myself, and when we were doing this research, it was uncomfortable hearing that repeatedly, that Europe has imposed agricultural practices on Africa that don't necessarily suit the different contexts in which they've been practiced. So, for example, like the work you're doing, Chris, with no-till, it's critical because tilling soil in places of heavy rains, you're automatically going to have a huge loss of topsoil. And so, it's definitely uncomfortable hearing, but very important that we hear that message of when we should really stop and listen before imposing any kind of sets of practices that may have worked in one context that may not be appropriate to another. Well, thank you so much to all of you for such incredible insights and more broadly for the work you do. I'd love to draw it to a close now and give you a few, 30 seconds each just to share what you want to leave people listening with from this work, and any key takeaways, and also any asks that you might have for support or for anything specific that you and your organizations need. So I'll hand over, Peter, please go ahead.
Yeah, so how I'd want to leave it is that at reNature, we believe that nature and agriculture can cooperate instead of competing. We also believe that farmers and local communities across the globe deserve long-term profitable future. That's why we focus on regenerative agroforestry. So for me, that's why I would leave it. We are still looking for partners whom we can join hands and promote agroforestry so that we can ensure that we have a profitable future together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry, struggling to unmute, so please jump in one after the other. Kofi, please.
Right, yeah, my final words, that we can increase incomes, and we are increasing incomes and biodiversity. And I want Europe to increase their investments into Africa in terms of sort of land mass allocated to regeneration and reforestation. Africa is in the lead. It's just in terms of the size of the continent, and I don't experience any resistance on the continent. Like, we want to do this, like, we're committed, but the incentives aren't there. So I think Europe plays a very, very key role in helping to provide those incentives, because institutionally in Ghana, everyone is ready for change and transformation. So, but we need to have a stronger partnership with Europe to achieve those goals.
Very powerful. Chris.
I mean, to keep it very short, I think that the message is that regenerative agriculture here in Africa is definitely possible, but it takes time. And in some places in the world, or some places in the continent, it's going to take longer than others. And the important thing that Europe needs to understand is not to punish those countries as a result of that. And continue, as Kofi said, continue to support, and in fact even increase the level of support that they may have otherwise given to those contexts where it's more difficult to implement this change. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I kind of asked for I wasn't sure what questions were coming in, so I asked for your wrap-ups before we took questions from the audience. I'm very tempted to leave it there because you've all made it sound, I mean, just it's very inspiring, and it's very clear that if we give those who are operating on the ground the opportunity to thrive, this change can really happen, and it is happening. So we have one question from the audience, which is slightly similar to a question we've already asked, but there may be some things that you want to add, and that was, what role can Europe play in helping Africa scale up regenerative agriculture on the behavioral mindset and the capacity building level? So I think we've touched on some of those elements, but if there's anything that each of you would like to jump in terms of regenerative agriculture on the behavioral mindset and capacity building level, the role of Europe.
I'll come in. I think there's a lot of best practices that are within Europe, but it has to be contextualized. As Chris was saying earlier, because even within it's different within each African country. There's also differences within countries. So I'd like to see, but we need to be careful with it. But I would like to see more knowledge transfer. But again, it needs to be contextualized, and it needs to be shared with an understanding, with an acknowledgement of sort of the inherent knowledge within Africa, and for it to be a two-way thing. So it's not just about Europe sharing that knowledge. It's also about Europe learning from Africa, because there are some good practices that are happening on the ground here too.
Like yourselves.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to jump in, please do.
So I have something close to what Kofi had just said, so that capacity building is Africa-centered, so that then it addresses the very issues that affect Africa. So capacity building is good, but let it be within the context that, within the local context, so that then it meets the intended goal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. Chris, did you want to add anything? Otherwise, I have another question.
No, I mean, let's move on so that we can get the other question as well.
Looks like that question is the same question that we just answered, I think, that's been shared with me again. So feel free to share your response to it.
Okay.
After building in behavior.
Sure. I mean, I think what Kofi said was, in one of the earlier responses was, that there's no resistance on this side of it actually towards regenerative agriculture, so from a behavior point of view. But actually, what I think is, I know I've mentioned this a few times, but what I think is incredibly important is to recognize that even if farmers, and local institutions want to, sometimes it's not possible because of the various other factors that they need to face within their context, such as something that Peter mentioned before was, trying to target food security and not just to think about regenerative agriculture, but to find ways to combine that together. So I think the behavioral shift and the capacity development around the behavioral shift comes from the support of farmers to actually have the space to think about adopting that behavior, right? So I guess I know it's a little bit vague in the way it's being said, but it's really help create the structures and the ecosystem that allows farmers to adopt that new behavior. And that's the angle that European organizations and whatnot to follow from a capacity building perspective.
Kofi, I can see you nodding.
Yeah. There's an example I wanted to bring up because, if you look at Global Gap, it says like a certification, and that, I sit on the board for the vegetable producers and exporters of Ghana. And, I've seen how Global Gap has helped organizations to sort of upskill and then sell their produce in Ghana and then also in Europe, right? So I'd love to see, and then it also almost gives them, once you have Global Gap certification, a lot of, then it opens up your market. So again, not stuff. I keep going on about carbon credits, and I want to stress that I know it's not a solution. It's not the only solution, but I say it again, it's an important pillar. So what sort of incentives can there be for organizations who go through such certifications, right? Like there is for Global Gap. Because, again, with the horticultural sector, you can make those shorter term investments. But when you're looking at regenerative agriculture, it's much longer term. It can take a year or two just to get the certification, right? And then another year or two before you receive the first payment. So what instruments, what incentives can there be? I'd love for there to be an exploration of that and implementation of that, so that, again, to lower the barrier for entry, because we have the labor youngest continent, so yeah, we're in a great position to do this.
Thank you so much. I'm left with feeling a huge amount of optimism from speaking with all of you. It feels very possible, feels very desirable, and I think that call to the incentives, having the right incentives in place to scale this is absolutely critical. So Europe, if you're listening, it's very clear what you need to do from our panel of experts. And it's really great for me to hear, Kofi, that you are involved on that board, that you can bring the wisdom that you're seeing on the ground into decision-making forums like that. So that's very exciting to hear. So I'm going to wrap up now. This has been a fantastic session. I think if we can share screens, again, I'll just share some contact details from us and some information where you can find out a little bit more about the work that we're doing. and also find some more information on these organizations. I strongly encourage you to support them and find ways to support them, because the work they're doing is absolutely critical. It is absolutely critical for our future, for everyone, given how interconnected we all are. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your work you're doing. I will look forward to hearing from everyone about all the collaboration that's going to take place as a result of this session. So thank you so much.